Welcome to GatherGeeks, a podcast by BizBash, the place where people passionate about meetings and events come together. Here are your hosts, BizBash CEO David Adler and Editor-in-Chief Beth Kormanik.
Hi, David.
Hey, Beth. Here we are, another GatherGeeks podcast.
It's our first of the year. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
And Happy New Year to our GatherGeeks listeners. Our guest today is Richard Attias, and he is of Richard Attias and Associates, which bills itself as a strategic advisory firm. But his background and philosophy are tied to events. He served as executive producer of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, was the co-founder of the Clinton Global Initiative and the Nobel Laureate Conference, and founded New York Forum. He's going to share insights from his experience as a global conference organizer. David, how did you get to know Richard?
Well, I had initial meetings with him, and I was like blown away by what an impact he has had in the discourse in the world, and how he believes in how these conferences and these meetings can really change everything. And it's interesting he talks about how the plenary sessions are not where the action is. That it's in the back rooms and it's in the private sessions that they're creating. And so it really was an interesting insight for all planners or organizers to listen to see where the action can really happen.
Right. And in this conversation, he's going to discuss the importance of a great moderator for when you do have those sessions and you want those to be valuable, why he is a big believer in Chatham House rules, and he defines that for any listener who doesn't know what that is, and why he always creates a budget for post-event activities. So let's take a listen.
So Richard, we're here talking about how the power of face-to-face events changed the world. And you have been at the forefront of that. As you know, this town square that we're talking about is no longer the big media play, but it's these venues and it's these conferences. And you've been one of the leaders, one of the collaboration artists of our time. Talk about, what have you learned about how people gather and actually accomplish things?
You know, David, more we are going in a virtual world, and more people, especially executives, world leaders, need to have a face-to-face conversation. You know, if we remember all, the biggest issue of the world, including peace in the Middle East, which is an unsolved problem until now, everybody remember Camp David conversation.
Yes.
So the private sector, the public figures, they also need their own Camp David. And this is how you can try to first have a better understanding about strategies. And also this is how you can be building call to actions. And this is how I think you can also build bridges between different cultures and different communities. So I see a very bright future for this part of the business, which is to have physical conversation and building platform for live conversation.
Okay, so this is not empty talk from you, because you have been doing this for years. Give our audience a little bit of the history of everything from back to the World Economic Forum days to why you found this such a secret sauce in the way the world works.
You know, as you know, I'm a civil engineer, and I started working in Europe. As you can guess with my English broken accent, I was started in France. And we had, in the 90s, the time where big global corporation, pharma groups, cosmetic groups, technology groups, they needed to have a conversation with different stakeholders, clients, even staff, etc. And then, in the beginning of the year 2000, we saw countries starting to have the conversation. And this was inspired by the World Economic Forum and the famous annual meeting of Davos, which is now more or less almost 45 years old platform. But in Davos, and I had the privilege to be the executive producer of Davos since 1995, we realized that when you put together the private sector leaders and the policy makers, public figures, academics, you have definitely a very dense conversation. So I was inspired by what is happening in Davos every year. And each single country, each single corporation wanted to have its own Davos. The Davos of culture, the Davos of art, the Davos of cybersecurity. And this is how were born different platforms that we were developing. including one which brought me to America, which was the Clinton Global Initiative. When the former President Clinton asked me, what should I do now? I told him in total modesty, Mr. President, you should stop to deliver speeches every 2 weeks, even if they are very well paid. And you need to have your own platform because you are a game changer. You are a brand. And this is how was born the Clinton Global Initiative, which, as you know, during 10 years was definitely a game changer, raising money and implementing changes all over the world.
So go back a little bit to the World Economic Forum. What was the aha moment? What point did that Davos goosebump moment happen?
You know, the magic of Davos is to have at the same place during a limited number of days all the people in the world who are making a real change. Of course, it is perceived still as an elite platform, not inclusive enough, which is not totally wrong, because you have rich and famous people and political leaders. Number two, they don't always predict what will happen. But
they're not always right.
Absolutely, they were not always right. But at least it is a nice place where you can brand who you are. You can brand your corporation, or you can brand your country. You can deliver the message. You can try to understand or to explain what is your vision, what is your strategy. This is why Davos will always be Davos.
But is Davos and all of your sort of strategy around this, we talk about what's happening on the stage, but is it really the smaller moments that you feel, the human moments that are connecting people? It seems like there's a lot of humanity to a lot of these conferences that you don't get on digital.
Yeah. Humanity is when you have the nightcaps at 10 p.m. in a small room with 50 people listening to a Nobel Prize, talking to a private sector guy, a business leader, talking to a former minister, and this is where, and with a lot of controversy, and this is where you definitely create this unexpected conversation, which could never happen digital.
Right.
This is something which is happening face to face, with even sometimes the obstacle of languages, because you have someone coming from the Arab world talking to an American guy and moderated by a European or a Chinese journalist. And this is when you have this unique moment that we are creating thanks to our platforms more and more now.
Do you find that is kind of the key to this? Yes, you can have the big statement events, but it's the idea that you as a collaboration artist understand how people really connect.
You know, today everything is transparent. We are living in this transparent world. Everything you say is the next second on the media. So this is why our face-to-face conversation, Chatham House rules, door closed, is very important.
Okay, tell us a little bit about those rules.
In fact, the rules are that you put 100 people or 50 people in the room. It is happening not only in Davos, it is happening at the Milken Institute Forum. It is happening to many of our conferences that we organize all over the world. And when we leave these 2,000 people sessions and we go to private sessions, no media. Or at least when we invite chief editors, they have to respect what we are calling the famous Chatham House rules, which is what is discussed in this room stays in this room. And this is where people are much more open, much more transparent, and this is when they express what they really think.
And do you see, I mean, you've been in these rooms, do you see controversy melt away? Or do
Absolutely.
And what is the process that happens? Like, nothing that you do is by accident.
No, you're right. But you know, when you tackle 2-3 different issues like refugees or trade issue between China and America, or even another issue which is climate change or globalization. Are you in favor or against globalization? When you have these small conversations happening on the side of the big forum, like the Bloomberg Forum, or like the one in Saudi Arabia that we organize, the Future Investment Initiative, which is talking about the future of investment, or even at other conferences on sports, about doping, corruption in sport. These important topics with a lot of controversy are happening in total transparency only when you have this door-closed conversation. And this is what is making a big difference.
Planning an event and wondering how you can give your attendees the best experience possible? Take advantage of customized meetings with Hilton that make it easier than ever to incorporate health, wellness, and great breaks. Hilton will help you build an extraordinary meeting that attendees will remember. To book your next meeting or event, go to meetings.hilton.com. How do you, as a collaboration artist, and I consider you one of the leading collaboration artists of the world.
Thank you.
How do you orchestrate those types of events to get people to be comfortable? Like, what do you do? What is the sort of the secret of your success on those?
Forgive me to be immodest, but first they know.
You don't have to be.
No. They know that
amazing.
when we organize something, usually it's quite well organized. You know, our 30 years of experience helped us a lot to build our reputation of being morally honest. We're not taking advantage of any of the platform that we organize. Number two, we are really trying to put people together to be game changers and to see some action. We are very action oriented. So by doing that in total transparency, usually big decision makers accept first to be joining our family and then to have this open conversation. And so, they know that we will never take advantage of what we're listening.
What is the facilitation technique when you have people in the room? You go into a room and at first they may know each other, but you have to
You need to have
orchestrate.
a great moderator.
And what are the attributes of a great moderator?
Okay, first of all, before talking to the moderator, the session is not happening by improvisation or coincidence. We are doing a lot of work in advance, proactively, to be sure that the people who will attend the session are ready and they are quite inspired by the topics that we will discuss, and they are quite expert and they have an opinion. So we do some homework before. And then when we put everyone around the table, the quality of the moderator is to be very direct, to be a timekeeper, and to know how to build a good chemistry and trust with all the people who are in the room, which is quite important. So when he build or when she build a trust relationship, then people feel more comfortable and then they speak in total transparency.
Is it an informal relationship? Does the person interrupt and say, maybe we should think about
Absolutely.
this other? So
Absolutely. It's very informal. Mm-hmm. It's very informal. And, I don't want to mention any specific names, but if we look at the United States of America, great anchors, when you think of people like Andrew Sorkin or Maria Bartiromo, they know how to create this magic in a room where people feel in total confidence with them. And usually they know that these people will respect the confidentiality of the conversation.
But that is a skill. I mean, when you're managing a conference, you have to make sure that the people that are facilitating are at the top level.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm spending personally much more time on hiring and finding the right moderators than finding the speakers. Because you can put the best speakers around the same table, but if you have a weak moderator, the conversation will be a disaster. You can have a second-tier potential speakers, people who are not very well known, but a great moderator, he or she will be able to take the best from these people, and then the conversation will be unique and unexpected. So the moderator is absolutely key in our forums.
So when you do your type of major events, what do the attendees have the warm and fuzzy feeling about these private sessions even more than the general session because they're participating?
People are definitely looking now more and more for attending this by invitation private session, small lunches, small dinners. They don't want anymore to be a passive audience. What is important is that what we are building now is to try to build events where you have active participants. So how can you be active when you are in a room with more than 50 people? This is where technology can help. Technology can help you to become an active participant thanks to app where you ask live questions, when you react directly with polling. So you are giving the feeling to the audience that they are part of the global conversation.
But you still need to have the big spectacle piece to get people to want to go to them. So part of your formula is the reason to go because there's a happening. I'm sort of trying to figure out what the formula is, and then the private sessions.
The successful equation is definitely the combination of big session with, I would say, a part of the show, and this is where the highest level of production is needed, If ideally you can have these big sessions live on TV, it's a plus. This is why media partnerships are very important. Then you go to this more private, interactive conversation that we are calling from our side the task forces. Because you arrive, you put an issue on the table, and you don't leave the room before 90 minutes unless you have solutions.
So 90 minutes is kind of your moment.
It's between 70 minutes and 90 minutes.
And when are they taking place during the day? So what is the
Usually
typical
we start
format?
every morning and we end every day with the big global debate, the big global conversation,
Okay.
where we are getting our town hall style conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. And then all day long, after this opening and closing, after the opening and before the closing sessions, we have a succession of task force, interactive conversation, night cabs, private lunches, and this is where you create also the group. Because an event is what also? One of the main goals of the platform that we create is to build a community.
Right.
A physical community.
Right.
And if you want this event to happen every year, you need to give the feeling to the community that they are part of something and they will be joining year after year. And this is how you also increase the community. So this is why you cannot create the feeling of being part of a community unless you have these small size sessions where people are starting by knowing each other, which is very important. You can it's very difficult to know who is sitting next to you in a big 2,000 hall. But when you are around the table with 10 people, after 5 minutes, you know exactly who is who.
So how do you do that? I mean, I know I do it with my Jeffersonian style dinner parties, but how do you do that in a meeting? What does the facilitator normally do? Is there like a breaking the ice approach?
Oh, definitely, you have to break the ice approach. Definitely, we push people to introduce themselves. Sometimes we definitely create these lunches or small groups by industry, so at least they know each other, even if they are competitors. So there are different techniques, and one of them is also to be proactive and to put on each table in front of each participant who is who and the bios of everyone. And this is facilitate immediately the conversation. You know, people who come to this event are usually people who are not shy.
Right.
So they come because they have an agenda. They have 2 days to definitely understand, but also to network. Networking is crucial.
But at what point does it go from me to we to to us? Like, do you see it? Do you see it change?
It's a very good question, and the answer is you have to build events with deliverables. Deliverables means initiatives. You need to have a purpose. You know, it's like the young people, the millennium today. They join a company only if the company has a purpose, right, and give them the feeling that they are working in a company which has also a mission, which is part of this sustainable goal of the UN, etc., or a corporate social responsibility role. So back to the event, I think it's important to also give the feeling that each single participant may potentially join an initiative. So you have to be proactive once again when you organize an event about investment, about youth, about sport. You need also to be ready, and this is where is one of the magic of what we are able to do, is to be proactive and to say, okay, what do we want to achieve? We have the privilege to put 2,000 people together. Many of them are decision makers. We're tackling a big, important topic like sport as a tool for social development and economic progress. But it's not just about talking about sport. How can we really become a game changer? So you come with ideas, you contact in advance corporations or individuals. Are you ready to be part of the initiative? Would you support the initiative? What will be your commitment? And then when we know they are ready for that, this is how we create immediately the group together.
So when you talk about an event as a platform, because a one-time event doesn't really work in the long run, correct? You're making a facial expression.
No, absolutely. You know, for years and years and years, I was trying to find a different word than event, because an event could be a birthday party to an event like Davos, or even an event we organized in Paris years ago when we hosted the Pope in Paris with 2 million people. It's an event. So what we're trying now to focus more is to create platforms and to build an ecosystem around the event. And this is very important. The ecosystem means that before, during, and after the event, you have different tools which keep you alive, which keep the community alive. And this is helping. A great help also is technology. The app, the website, the definitely podcast, everything that we can use with technology is helping the event to be going on not only during the 2 or 3 days of the conference, but as I said, all year long.
Yeah, so what is the number one technique that you've used to keep it alive after the event? It seems to be one of the common struggles of everyone in this industry is how to keep the enthusiasm there.
This is another very good question. You know, the owner of the conference, the owner of the event, whoever he or she is or they are, should definitely allocate a budget. Because at the end of the day, we should talk also about budget, not just for the event, but for the post-event. Because you need to spend some money for what we are calling the maintenance of the event.
Yes.
You need to keep it alive, which means you need to definitely have a 365 days alive app, because the app will help you to maintain the dialogue between participants after the event. You need to fuel the app with content. For example, at the Future Investment Initiative Forum, we conducted more or less 100 interviews of people who were attending. And this is what TED is doing very well. The TED conference is maintaining the dialogue, the conversation, the relationship with their members, their participants all year long by maintaining a virtual dialogue, by releasing these videos, and this is what we are doing also, you know. So it's only, and then when on the top of that, after an event, you are creating 2 or 3 initiatives or launching 2 or 3 initiatives. The initiatives are also an amazing opportunity to maintain the conversation with your different participants.
I would assume, I'm just guessing here, that that's the area for the most improvement in terms of the post-event, in terms of keeping that fresh, or is because everyone's focusing on next year's event and the content for next year's event. Is there a problem there yet?
Where we are working, and as you know, this is a conversation we had, you and I, and we are looking for more and more innovation. This is where I think technology will help us a lot. As you can guess, I'm a strong believer on physical event,
right,
face-to-face conversation, but I'm not ignoring at all the impact of social media and the impact of technology.
The marriage of these
marriage of these two things will help us to keep the conversation alive between 2 annual edition of what I'm calling the physical platform. So this is very important.
When you talk about the physical platform, too, one other point that I'm struggling to understand is the personality and the DNA of the actual event. Is it important to have a personality, a leader at the event, or does the event itself become the thing? Like, is there a host at these events? Is there a person? Is it?
I think it's a big danger if the event is personalized only on one person. And I will give you 2 very basic examples.
Okay, good.
The Clinton Global Initiative, and one event which was happening in Israel called Tomorrow. One, of course, was based on President Clinton, and one was based on the late Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres passed away, no more Tomorrow conference. The Clinton Global Initiative, Hillary Clinton decided to run for president, no more CGI.
So what is your strategy to give it that personality and that power without having the danger of what we were just talking about?
So you say the perfect word, DNA. You need to build a DNA from the very beginning to make the platform sustainable. How? Number one, everybody should recognize that, this platform always welcome great minds, great people. They have unexpected conversation. The topics are always very accurate. We meet great people. It's very well organized. So the quality of the logistics, in Davos, my nightmare was not sometime to miss a session based on the 300 plus sessions. It was to not have the car on time to welcome one of my VIP at Zurich airport, because this was the bad beginning of the forum. So, everything in the detail. So the DNA is quality of execution, is quality of production, is quality of content, the right people, the right timing, respect the wishes of the participant, which is very important. You need to ask them what they want. And this is what is making us, and some clients who are too kind with us are calling us the Black American Express. Because this is what you expect.
Right.
You expect to go to a conference or an event or a platform because you are getting the best services. And at the end of the day, when you have that, the brand of the event is more powerful than an individual.
You're investing in that,
Of course.
the DNA of the brand.
Absolutely.
And I call it a parasocial relationship.
Yeah.
It's a two-way relationship with a fictional
and this is
character.
how you build also the soft power of the conference itself. So everybody is going to the Bilderberg conference. When you have the privilege to be invited to the Bilderberg conference, which is one of the top conferences, Chatham House rules, no one is able to tell you who is behind the Bilderberg conference as of today.
That's great.
So it will be a different challenge about the Milken conference. Everybody knows that there is a brain behind the Milken conference. So the question is, what will happen to the Milken conference if Mr. Milken decide one day to retire or to not run it again? So this will be an important question mark. But when you build and this is what we are trying to do, all the platform we are creating are not built on one person. They could be built on an institution. Mm-hmm. We started recently a very interesting conference on sport called Olympism in Action. Of course, the host is the International Olympic Committee, but the International Olympic Committee is an institution. It's not about one person. But more importantly, in case the International Olympic Committee do not want anymore to be involved, what is making this conference alive? Sport. So the main topic, everybody today, culture, music, sport, are talking to everybody. It's a common language. So when the main topic is powerful enough to bring people together, then the platform will be sustainable.
Well, the platform, though, has to result in something.
Yeah.
So how do you judge whether what's actually happening is the right outcome?
Okay, so I will give
sure
an
you
example.
have an opinion of this.
No. You are making another very valid point, David. There is a big difference between the will and the wish to have initiatives and the real tangible results. So, again, two examples. A year and a half ago, the French President Macron decided to launch a platform that we organized in Paris called the One Planet Summit. It was about climate change. So he was able to bring together 54 world leaders, 3,000 people, including people from the civil society like Mike Bloomberg, Sean Penn, Governor Schwarzenegger, etc., etc. They made different commitments. So to be sure that they will respect their commitments, every 3 to 6 months, we are doing a follow-up. So the follow-up is key. This is why sometimes you have to create a secretariat, just with 4 or 5 people maximum, to be doing the follow-up, to be sure that people who after the conference are very busy, back to their normal life, will continue to commit. And this is why the One Planet Summit small edition happened in September 2018 in New York, under the umbrella of the Bloomberg Foundation. And this is why another edition of One Planet Summit will happen in Kenya in March, during the visit of President Macron, again to do the follow-up and to prove to people that the commitment have to be transformed in tangible results. And it is the case. At least for that event, I can tell you all the corporations or institutions who made commitment to try to clean oceans, to protect forests in Africa, they are doing the job and they are investing money.
So the back end piece, I mean, because as someone who's been in government, they love doing the press conference to announce something, and then they hate doing anything afterwards.
You are absolutely
right. So
right.
how do you? So you
need to be a pin. Forgive me to be vulgar. A pin in the ass.
Yes, but the job as an event, that's not normally the task of somebody that you're hiring to do an event.
This is why we don't consider ourselves being in an event business, and this is why we define ourselves as being communication strategy advisory firm, because this is what we are.
Right.
Events is part of our job.
I believe that you're a collaboration artist. That's kind of the concept
absolutely.
I use.
And this is, we are becoming a catalyst, a catalyst of thinkers, of great minds, of producers, of definitely institutions who are transforming the world. And we are trying to be more and more inclusive, because you need also to work with NGOs, you need to work with governments, and you need to work with the private sector.
We're going to take a little break and come right back after this message from Hilton. So when's the big event? Hilton's here for planners with their exclusive customized meetings. Become a wow maker and save time by letting Hilton help you present an extraordinary event, one that leads to memorable and meaningful connections. Visit meetings.hilton.com and let Hilton help you. So taking it like really the bigger, looking at the Earth from the moon, is this way that people collaborate the way we have progressed? Do you think that there is this part of the solution? It's the only way. Wow, that's a good statement. Okay, I believe that.
It is the only way. This is why with a lack of modesty, we are calling ourselves a catalyst.
Yeah.
And my engineering background helped me a lot to realize that when you put the right ingredients together, you create immediately the right chemistry equation. And this is what would, it is the only way, it is the only way. Because you have to put together around the table people with different cultures to have the right understanding. So you cannot solve any issue in the world unless you have a dialogue.
So as a engineer, you've had to test different things. Have you seen things that don't work when you're getting people together? I mean, the idea of the chemistry. What is sort of the secrets of that?
If you are not inclusive, it doesn't work for the long term.
If it's just the buddies,
for the buddies. When I left the World Economic Forum Galaxy 10 years ago, I immediately decided to create a more inclusive platform, because I knew, and I made that public many times, that if you ignore the millennium, if you ignore the citizen in global conversation, you will not go anyway. This is why I started in Africa the African Citizen Summit, because you cannot just deal with African leaders who are totally under critics by their citizen about corruption, about just making promises and not delivering. So who will be doing the follow-up? The citizen. This is why I was putting platforms and creating platforms where we were inclusive with citizens. And this is what we are facing in France today. President Macron was elected as a hero. He was an unexpected political leader. He really broke all the rules of politics. And he got 75% plus of votes for his election. And 18 months later, which is nothing, he is the most unpopular president in France. And he has to face for the past 3 weeks with what we are calling the yellow jacket movement, which were in the street for 4 consecutive weekends. Why? Because we are not including from the very beginning a part of the society.
So if you had to help solve that problem, and you were going to use the idea of face-to-face interaction, what comes out of your mind to help solve that problem?
But I was not heard.
Okay, well, that's okay, but we're going to hear it here.
So now you are gaining something very...
Okay. And then I want to ask you a couple of other problems and how to solve them.
My recommendation was to open the doors of the Élysée Palace and to host 50 people who will be designated by the movement. And to say, okay, I'm the president in total security and safety environment, open to the media, let's have a 3 hours conversation face to face.
What is your vision of how that actual meeting looks like? Who is facilitating that?
That's a very good question. Who will be facilitating? And I think I didn't thought about that. But now that you are asking me this very challenging question, I think we should find at least 2 facilitators who could be journalists, but journalists with no agenda. Right. Journalists respected by definitely the audience. And it should be like a TV debate, but not a show. A real deep conversation. And at the end of these 3 hours, we should leave the room with a roadmap, which will be, okay, you know what, guys? It's not today that we'll be in agreement. But at least, thanks to the conversation, you understand us. We understand you. We hear you. So let's build a task force and let's have something which will be implemented for the next 4, 5, 6 weeks to try to come with solutions and suggestions to the government. Instead of that, President Macron decided to deliver a speech, which was a very powerful speech, by the way. And he came already with beginning of solutions and answers. But unfortunately, the dialogue really didn't happen. And these people in the street came back again in the street. Why? Because they want the face-to-face conversation.
Right.
They don't want to fight.
Right.
They want to talk.
So smart political leaders have to be engaged in the same thing that you're talking about. They have to be the collaboration artists.
This is what I did in Jordan. This is what I did in Gabon, as 2 countries as an example. Big social issues. We decided with the leaders of the country in past few years to organize platforms with 1,000 people representing all the different constituency of the society, from nurses to teachers to soldiers to political leaders, etc. 2 days of a big town hall meetings with people coming with crazy ideas, but at least they were suggesting ideas. And then a wrap-up summary presented to the leader with spokesperson of each group. We didn't find the solution immediately, but it was the beginning of the solution.
Yes.
Why? Because they were heard.
So how do you, when you go and speak to a head of state, and I've had these conversations with a few people myself, when does the light bulb go off with the head of state that, oh my God, this is a great way to think about this?
Okay, I will tell you what is happening. Head of states are usually all very smart. They will not be head of states unless they are super smart. The problem is not the head of state. The problem is the entourage. The entourage refuse to take risks because they think that this will be a risky exercise for their leader, which I think is wrong, totally wrong. If you put the leader with his own people, this is what people want. They are not there to attack the leader, okay? They are there to have a conversation, to create controversy. So the problem is why it is not happening so often is because the entourage usually are blocking. They are stopping. They don't want to be blamed for something which will happen and goes wrongly, because of course you can have always something happening.
So how do you get in? How do you change the leader's mind that goes beyond against the entourage?
We spend a lot of time to convince them to have this open conversation.
The entourage,
yes, and it's not easy.
And the ones that
it's
are
probably the most difficult exercise.
Right.
But it is happening little by little. It is taking time, but it is happening little by little. You have some African leaders who are open for this conversation. You have some leaders in the Middle East who are more and more open for this global conversation. I don't think this will happen tomorrow in China. I don't think this will happen tomorrow in some even European countries, but it is happening.
Let me bring like a very U.S. based argument. Okay, we have the Democratic Party.
Correct.
We don't actually know what they stand for because everybody is all over the place. Should there be some sort of can you imagine some sort of event, a constitutional Congress or something that brings together people to actually enable them to articulate where they stand on everything?
I have the privilege and the honor to spend a lot of time in your country, but there is something which I'm questioning myself for the past 2 years. The Democrats are criticizing every single day President Trump, but I don't see one voice representing the Democrats.
Right.
The first thing they should do now is to decide ASAP who is their leader. Who is their leader? You need a leader.
But you do that
you
using
need a
an
voice.
event as the
Absolutely.
event
You need
platform.
to have an open debate. You need to have an open debate. You need to have all the different democratic leaders explaining themselves, explaining how they see the change, what will be their own program. We should not wait the last minute to see who will be a candidate and then to go on TV for what I'm calling a show where you have the candidate debating. No. We don't want shows
anymore. Is this the
anymore.
time right now to
the
have?
Time is now.
The
time is now.
What would Richard do if you were king of the world?
The time is it's too pretentious that, but no. Definitely I think the time is now to have one voice speaking on behalf of the Democrat. Point number one. Why? Because we need strong United States of America in the world.
How do you use a platform of people talking to each other to get to that one voice?
You have already the vehicle. The vehicle is the party.
Right. The party has to do something.
The party has to do something. Absolutely. The party has to do something. The party has to start having a collaborative small events maybe in different states, and then you create a full movement. You have to create a movement. You have to create a movement where each state will express what they want. Maybe some new leaders will emerge from some states.
We are in the greatest industry in the world, this event collaboration world. Why isn't it a knee-jerk reaction to use what we do as a way to, it doesn't have to be just to hire you or anyone else, why can't they use this and understand the power that we understand about this?
Because they are, I think, too much busy with their different agendas.
Yeah.
And you know, when you have a political agenda,
Yeah.
you don't, unfortunately, think a more global and bigger picture.
Right.
That's
I mean,
the
it's so
problem.
obvious to us.
It's obvious. It's obvious. Today, so many leaders have only one goal,
Right.
is to put President Trump outside of the White House. This is not working. You're living in democracy. The president will have his mandate, and then you have to have an open, transparent election, open, transparent conversation, dialogue, and the citizen will vote. But for now, you have to start this opposition solid behind the leader who will represent the voice of the alternative.
Okay, we're going to solve the problems of the world, but let's end on the idea of what's next. What is the future of what we do, this collaboration, these conferences? I mean, you've created these platforms. You're here in Manhattan. You're poised to really revolutionize this industry in a good way, bringing this kind of thinking. And it doesn't matter whether it's Davos or whether it's a small industry to solve a problem.
Definitely, I think our industry will be totally transformed in the next 2 or 3 years by finding the right equation between the physical aspect of our event, which will always be what it is, and how to digest, to integrate technologies which will make a lot of sense to support what we are already doing. And I think this is the next challenge, starting from the first experience of the participant attending the conference. Participants want today to be, as I said, active participants. They want to have a live experience. They want to have a unique journey. They want to leave the conference being more smart than what they were before when they arrived. And last but not least, they want to be part of something. So this is the equation, which is not an easy equation to solve, but I think it could be solved by integrating new technologies, and this is where we have to work together.
The other aspect of that is, the one thing I'm noticing is that the minute you leave a conference, a lot of the content and the things that you're thinking about go away. So how do you, in real time, transmit what you're hearing to the rest of the people? I sit, and when I take notes at an event, I'm on Slack.
You made the point.
And I'm sending it to, hey, how come we haven't done this?
Thanks
how
to
come we haven't done that?
technology, because technology is behind social media. So it's definitely thanks to technology. You will have your own video channels. You know, today we have Twitter, and Twitter is starting to be more and more personal media. You know, everyone is using his own Twitter to become an influencer. But definitely, this is one of the way, and I'm sure that new Twitter equivalent will exist in the next 5 years, 10 years.
Right. I also think that the next superstars are the collaboration artists who are great facilitators and great event organizers who put these communities together. And I view what I do, and I think what you do, is that when you run an event, you're kind of the mayor of the niche, and that you got to do everything from picking up the trash to taking the big bows in order to do it correctly.
You're right. But you know, you mentioned one word, artists.
Yes.
I think they are part of the solution of your question. Because when you produce so much content, you need to find a way to digest that content.
Absolutely.
People do not have time anymore to read.
Right.
People do not have time anymore to listen.
Right.
So we need, thanks to artists, to find a way to make all this content graphically, easily understandable, attractive. So this is what is important, because when you have a 1 hour conversation between 4 private equity guys who are telling to the world where should you invest and what will happen, etc., it's quite difficult to understand and to read. So it could be even boring at the end of the day, even if the content is very interesting. So thanks to maybe artists, thanks to technology, we need to transform this 1 hour content in 5-minute, very attractive content. And this is one of the challenges that we have to solve.
Well, we're going to continue this conversation because I think that I do believe, and I know that you believe, that what we're doing can change the world in really positive ways. It's like we know it. we see it every
And we
single
feel it.
day, and
And
we feel it. And so how do we sort of make this part of the platform for the world?
Absolutely.
So with that, thank you, Richard.
I'm looking forward. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're back in our podcasting studio. That was a really interesting look behind the strategy of high-level political, economic, and financial events, or the events that people in these circles should be having if they're stuck in a bad format or in something that there is not working, or if they're risk averse. Here's what they should be doing.
Yeah, it's also interesting that there's an application for every type of industry. You don't have to be the head of a state to have this concept of discourse, that it can work with almost anything. And it's more of a technique and a format and an art.
So here's a point that I found really fascinating, that he's spending more time finding moderators than the speakers themselves. This kind of blew me away. It's a great reminder that moderators, they're not an afterthought, and you can and should vet them and coach them before your event.
Absolutely. I think he's making that clear. And he's adding to the idea that it's important to think about every detail of an event. And it's not just about the things you think about that would be natural, but every aspect of the dinners and the breakfasts and the transportation and all things where people interact.
Yeah, another one of his strategies is to build events with deliverables. To think about your mission, what you want to achieve. And this makes sense when you think about these big global events and, he wants to make headlines. Here's what I'm wondering though. Can associations do this? Like, should a trade show have these kind of goals where they want to identify the deliverables beforehand? What do you think?
I believe that is, even in a speech, there should be some deliverables that the speaker is trying to do at the end of the day. That everything should have some sort of deliverables, especially in the age of the takeaway, which we know that everybody wants the takeaway and make it simple so they can translate the information from where you heard it to the people that you want to transmit it to in your office or in your home or in a party even.
Great.
This is what I found also with this, Richard, is that listening to this podcast was like a master class in how to actually do it correctly. And I think it's must listening for anybody in the event industry, in the meeting industry, in the people industry.
Well, speaking of takeaways, that's one for our listeners, and can't get out of doing that if you don't plan global events. You can't just leave it to the Richards of the world. No, this is something that everybody should be thinking about at their own events.
So, Beth, what is going on in the world of BizBash as we start this new year?
That's right. It's a new year, and our editorial team has been working hard to get you ready for this year. We have venue previews for the most exciting places that are opening this year in cities across North America. We have the latest in event tech, the freshest catering trends, and a look at what's in store for major events throughout the year. We also looked at what the event world needs to leave behind in 2018. So stay current and check all of that out at bizbash.com.
Great. Well, thank you, Beth. And before we end, we'd like to thank the people that helped make this podcast possible. Dave Nelson, who is our producer. Rebecca Pappas, who is helping in the distribution and our audience development of the podcast, and Claire Hoffman, who is our editorial backbone of helping to create the listings and the keywords and all the good things that you need to create a great podcast. So with that in mind, what do we say now, Beth?
Gather on.
Gather on.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. We can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Player FM, Google Play, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to leave us a rating and review. It helps others discover the GatherGeeks podcast. We'd also love to hear from you. You can leave feedback on Twitter at GatherGeeks or leave us an email, gathergeeks@bizbash.com. We hope you'll join us again for the next episode of GatherGeeks. Until then, gather on.